screen starts glowing and the film starts rolling. You wanna be knowing what you might be in for. So give the show a listen and find out what you're missing. Put yourself in position for the is a good score.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to The Goods, a film podcast. It's November. You out there, Dan?
I am, Brian. It's deep in the heart of fall. The tree right outside my window of my office is in that state where it's like raining leaves. I cannot conceive that a tree could have so many leaves that they could fall at that rate constantly, you know?
Yeah, it seems like it's happened really fast this year. Like, they stayed on the tree for a long time, and then suddenly the last 3 days, it's like each day the yard is full.
And I think that's kind of in line with the weird weather. I mean, maybe it's just global warming.
It hasn't rained at all. It didn't rain at all in October. And I think still has not rained. We're almost like 10 days into November.
Which I didn't entirely mind because I didn't have to mow because our grass didn't grow at all. But also, it's been really warm. This is a warm October. A rare month for warmth, if you ask me. It was like 70 degrees when we were walking around trick-or-treating for Halloween.
Jeez. Yeah, yesterday I walked out to my car, and part of it may have been, sitting on the asphalt, but the thermometer in there said 86.
Dear God.
I'm sitting here with my shirt off because I turned the fan off so that you don't have background fan noise on the Zoom call. But I'm sweating.
Well, luckily we didn't just elect a president and a Congress that's going to totally deregulate corporations and let them fill our atmosphere with carbon dioxide. Oh, wait, no, that's exactly what we did. That's all right. Warm October isn't the end of the world. At least, not for another 50 years or something like that.
That's right.
Unless you live in Miami.
Yeah, Dan was talking about doing a Swing Vote episode, the movie Swing Vote with Kevin Costner. But we pushed back today's recording a little bit because I've been busy doing video editing, and now I don't know if we're feeling that anymore. I don't know if Dan is feeling that anymore.
It would just be kind of depressing for me to talk about personally, I think. I wouldn't want to be a downer for the audience. So, you win some elections, you lose some elections. I wasn't too enthused about the results, and I know people don't listen to this podcast to hear us talk about politics, so I'll spare everybody else.
Right.
Yeah, there's plenty of misery online. If you really want to know what people are bummed out about the election, you don't have to search too far. You're a savvy internet consumer, listener of this podcast. You can go find that political misery or that political jubilation. You want to be like, Grover Cleveland, man. Yeah, wahoo. We did it.
Whatever bent you are, whatever stripe, you can go sit in your social media echo chamber. But we are carrying on spooky season a little bit because that's how I like to do it. I like to have some time to decompress after Halloween is over. So we are talking Tim Burton today, as we've done several times before, with the film Mars Attacks from 1996. Longtime listeners may remember some other Tim Burton movies that we've covered. So what can you think back to, Dan?
We actually have pretty extensive Burton coverage, more than any director, barring the directors that we've done kind of focused episodes on, I would say. So we talked about the Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Is that what it's called? The feature. We talked about Ed Wood. We talked about Nightmare Before Christmas, which is not a Burton directed feature, but he produced it and he wrote the short story. We talked a little bit about his involvement in there, and I think it's called Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. So, it's still kind of a Tim Burton movie. In much the same way that Babe is a George Miller movie, May not have been the directed credit, but it's associated with that creator.
Yeah, or like Steven Spielberg on The Goonies.
Sure, yeah. Or Poltergeist, although don't some people think that he actually directed Poltergeist?
I think so.
But then I feel, am I missing one, or is that everything?
The very first one we did was Sleepy Hollow.
Oh, yeah.
As part of a big slate of Sleepy Hollow adaptations.
That's right, yeah.
And actually, back when we talked Ed Wood, that was a biopic about the director who made some low-budget sci-fi films in the 50s having to do with alien invasion, like Plan 9 from Outer Space. And during our discussion, Dan said, well, why didn't Tim Burton just make a remake of Plan 9 from Outer Space? Like, what would Tim Burton's alien invasion film be? And actually, this was his very next film that he made. 2 years later was Mars Attacks. So you guys were on the same page.
Although I think part of the context for that is that the black and white photography was so beautiful. It was like, this just looks like a terrifically shot 1950s black and white movie. Can we do that in something that's like actually a genre piece? So this one's not black and white, but you're right. I think he's a good match to First Contact alien shenanigans.
Yeah, shenanigans are rife here. There's just a lot that happens in this movie. And it's really colorful. Mars Attacks was adapted from a series of trading cards from 1962 made by the Topps baseball card company.
Can you really say adapted if the source material is trading cards? Like inspired by, I guess? I don't know. I guess it takes like the characters that are on the trading cards.
Right. So if you read these trading cards, there's like an Imgur album that I will link in the Discord discussion for this episode. But they do have like a story on the back of them. Like there's 60 or so cards and each one has a scene on it and like a little caption. And then if you turn the card over, it's got like a chapter of a story. So
let's take a step back. Why did Topps make Mars Attacks cards? Like, was there a specific... They make baseball cards. Was there a specific incentive for them to make alien cards, or was it just a neat idea they had that they thought people would buy?
Well, that's a great question. Now I'm wondering, did they make the Garbage Pail Kids? Yeah, they did.
Okay.
So they made character cards of various stripes. The Garbage Pail Kids, of course, being like slightly crass parodies of the Cabbage Patch Kids. So they've experimented. You can have different things on a trading card.
Sure.
But these Mars Attacks series told the story of Martians attacking the Earth and then eventually humans rising up and fighting back. And they were kind of salacious for the time and violent in the things that they depicted, especially for things targeting a young audience in 1962. They were kind of edgy. There's like the implication of various kinds of predations that the Martians are inflicting on the humans.
Interesting.
So it's kind of notorious. There was also, a little later, a series called Dinosaurs Attack. So in the early 90s, this screenwriter, Jonathan Gems, who Wikipedia says is best known for Mars Attacks, was shopping, let's make either a Mars Attacks movie or a Dinosaurs Attack movie. But by that point, we already had Jurassic Park, so they're not biting on Dinosaurs Attack. But things came together for this Mars Attacks adaptation, yes, of trading cards. Turn trading cards into a movie.
Brian, I'll interject here. I was just scrolling through eBay as you were talking more about those cards. You can buy a complete graded set, 55 cards, for the low price of $4,750 plus $29.95 in shipping.
Oh my god. Well, they're graded, so they're quality.
Yeah, they're authentic.
Or you could just scroll through the Imgur album that we're gonna hook you up with. What was your awareness of this one before this week, Dan? The movie.
So I actually remember the marketing on this one. Because it's got that really distinctive alien character that most of the aliens we see are pretty much this exact same model. It's kind of like a big brain alien, it's kind of like a stereotypical Martian depiction, little green men. I don't know how much this trading card kind of popularized that image or something. I'm not sure. But I vaguely remember this, and I was, what is this, 1996? So I was 8 years old when this came out. And I definitely got the impression that it was like a scary or intense movie. And now I see this alien, I'm like, okay, this thing is obviously kitsch, I don't know. But I had kind of totally forgotten about this movie. But as soon as you assigned it, I was like, I do remember that film. And it hadn't clicked that it was a Burton film. So I was interested to go revisit it. And I, of course, was thinking of a bunch of different things as I started watching it. But what are some connections for you on this one, Brian? What's your background with it?
So the first time I saw this, I think, was on a 4th of July some year. It was on TV. And I tuned in a little ways in, and I got really sucked into watching it on TV. It's like, how did this evade my notice for so long? Because this was probably in like 2007 or 2008 when I was in high school. And in some ways, I feel like this movie's kind of tailor-made for me. There's a lot of things here that I vibe with. I think it's interesting to note that it was the same year as Independence Day.
That was my number one connection. I was like, this is just the wacky version of Independence Day,
Definitely.
There's a lot in common, including an emphasis on president and government response to the first contact, but also we don't know if the aliens are nice or mean. Spoilers, the word attacks is in the title, so I think you can figure it out that nice is not what they are. And then there's like a combination of government officials, but everyday people also,
Right, it's a global affair, and so you're checking in with different groups of characters, and how does the Earth respond when suddenly a whole armada of aliens show up?
But the tone is just totally different. And I like Independence Day. I think it's the kind of blockbuster they don't make anymore. Or when they do, it's not good. And it's like cheap, ugly streaming stuff. And so I was, when I revisited that one a couple of years ago, I dug it. It's not deep, but it's compelling. Good spectacle. Charismatic cast. Just very solid production. Like, you really see the money on screen in a way that it's like not, I don't want to say it's not cheaply digital, because there very much is a lot of cheap digital stuff in here, but like it always feels big budget in a way that sometimes even the big budget movies nowadays just feel like glossy trash, ugly. This one's got lots of stuff going on. And both this one and Independence Day kind of have that trait for me. So they really, but just tone-wise, they're mirror images of each other.
Yeah, very different. So Mars Attacks has got like that retro influence, like definitely some Ed Wood in here. But also it's just that stuff that Tim Burton loves, of like the pastel suburbia, like even the normal humans are over the top, that Edward Scissorhands kind of thing. Just everything super saturated, colorful. Whereas the Independence Day is a little more grim, dark, like Armageddon, Godzilla 98 type blockbuster flagship thing.
It's kind of got more of a macho vibe to it, This one does not. It's like, I use the word kitsch. That's the word that I kind of thought of. Like, kind of campy almost, I guess.
Definitely. This movie starts with the ships approaching the Earth. It doesn't really beat around the bush. From the jump, the aliens are coming, and the president finds out about it.
And I love this opening scene because it's a normal family. They're like, something's going on here. And then we see, it's just a terrific image. It's a herd of flaming cows come running by. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, I bet that is like the first card in the Topps series. I don't know if it actually is, but It's just such a distinct image. It kind of feels like it's pulled from something.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the cards, and I guess the filmmakers fought to include this. The studio is like, that's too much. We can't have animals on fire. And we're like, no, it sets the tone. And then, yes, smash cut to the president learning about what's impending, and his advisors discussing, well, what do we do? And pitching different ways to respond.
So you said smash cut to the president, but there is one other thing that's in between, and that's the credit sequence. And I really like this credit sequence. I think it does another good job of setting the tone, as you said. Because this is 1996, and there's a lot of CGI, but it's specifically the aliens and everything the aliens related, and only, to my knowledge at least the way it popped out, only the aliens and the associated alien stuff that is CGI. So we meet the fleet of UFOs in this CGI, and I actually kind of like the way that it looked. Like it's ugly and it's like kind of gnarly, but it's consistent in this. And the way that we just kind of meet them all in this shiny CGI flying saucers coming in, it definitely sets the mood. I was vibing here at the beginning. I was like, okay, this is a little over the top. This is a little cheesy 1996 computer graphics, but you know what? It feels in spirit with the sci-fi vibe of it, you know?
What it kind of makes me think of is our discussion in the Mask episode, that it works if everything that's depicted by the CGI is like some otherworldly presence.
Right.
You know, the Mask, he turns into a cartoon. He develops all the Tex Avery powers. And having that depicted by some, like, off-putting, uncanny CGI, it still manages to feel cohesive, because it's like, that's what he is. And they're not really crossing the streams. There's nothing, like, in between both worlds like we had with the dancing baby and Son of the Mask.
I just remembered the "Hello, my baby" from Son of the Mask. Oh,
but that of course had its charm in a way as well. Never forget Son of the Mask.
Much as we might want to.
So I'm on the same page with you that I like these aliens. I guess there was some discussion of could they do it stop motion, which would have been very like Harryhausen-y, and I would have liked to have seen that. I guess they made the determination that would be too time-consuming, too expensive, but I think what they settled on works. Because these Martians are going to be very present. They're very much like you see them a lot. There's no Jaws type hide the shark. The president is played by Jack Nicholson, and some of the advisors that he meets with, he's got a PR kind of spin doctor person played by Martin Short. There's a scientist played by Pierce Brosnan. We also have got two generals who are repeatedly advising him. One who's very like militant and saber rattling, and another one who is always bringing up, well, how will this look to the populace? How will this look to the press? And that second guy is a black general who, to me, very much reads as a stand-in for Colin Powell.
I mean, he looks just like him, too.
Yeah. And what I was thinking watching this time, any time that it'll cut to the president and this circle of advisors, it had me thinking of Dr. Strangelove, especially because like halfway through the movie, they wind up down in a bunker that's very evocative of the war room set in the Kubrick film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And here's where I will ask, Dan, have you seen Dr. Strangelove?
So, I can't remember if it was on air or not, but you mentioned that this had a lot of connective tissue to Dr. Strangelove. And so I was like, maybe now's the time for me to finally bite the bullet. Not that it's like a pain to watch a great movie, you know, it's a joy to watch a great movie. But maybe now is the time for me to finally watch Dr. Strangelove. That's one of the ones, I think Brian and I both have ones where the other be like, you still haven't seen blank, right? And for me, it was Dr. Strangelove. Like whenever we talked about anything Cold War-ish, anything nuclear, military, president, Brian would be like, "Oh, you still haven't seen Dr. Strangelove, have you?" It's like, "No, I still haven't seen Dr. Strangelove." Well, I finally went and I saw Dr. Strangelove this past week, and who would have thunk it's a great movie? Wow, controversial.
Yeah, I've been trying for years to get Dan to watch Doctor Strangelove, and so this is like the Shadow Doctor Strangelove episode. We're going to talk about it a bit. I don't know if you feel that it was warranted that this be the week, but I do definitely see like some nods.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, part of the kind of, you called it the pastel suburbia, that's like a sort of heightened parody of the 1950s America, Leave It to Beaver type stuff that Tim Burton just loves, you know? And I think that's very closely tied with Sputnik Cold War imagery as well. And like the classic voice I think of like those 50s duck and cover videos or like infomercials, like, and here's where the Martians came and met the president. And I don't know, I could just like imagine this playing out in Tim Burton's head in his sort of like weird stew of inspirations that pervade his films.
Yeah. And so it's a movie, both are, where there's this global catastrophe from the opening moment of the film. Like, things have gone very, very wrong, and now the president and his advisors have got to find a way to respond to it. And over the course of the story, we will check in with like a pretty big group of characters, different people that we return to several times. And things might get better, but they're probably only going to get worse. So I first saw Dr. Strangelove in 7th grade. Our American history teacher showed it to us in class, and I was very into it. I've talked before that, like, when I was in 6th and 7th grade, for whatever reason, like, my dad gave me Tom Lehrer albums, and I took it to heart that, like, what adults do is, like, steep themselves in Cold War culture. Like, that's what it means to be an adult, is to be, like, part of the Red Scare zeitgeist.
Do you still feel that way?
Well, I don't know. I still think, like, smoking jackets and parlors and, like, I think when we've talked about this before, I said ashtrays in your car are part of being mature. So this is like, yeah, that same idea of Cold War paranoia, but through a weird Burton-y cartoon lens. And so we won't beleaguer Dr. Strangelove too much. I am really glad that you watched it. We'll probably return to it by the end of the episode. Glad that you liked it. I would give it a strong rating, and when we rate at the end, probably we'll talk what scores. But for now, it's Mars Attacks. And everybody in the world is in this movie, Dan.
I just couldn't believe my eyes. Every scene for like the first half hour, that's barely even a joke. For every scene for the first half hour, some new actor who could have been the star of a movie, like A or B list actor, would appear, or like a cameo from like a noteworthy celebrity. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is this cast? It's genuinely mind-blowing. Like, this ranks up there with the most ridiculous ensemble of any movie I've ever seen.
So I was reading about the making of this film, and I guess the writer Jims and Burton were influenced by like ensemble disaster films of the 70s. So The Towering Inferno and The Poseidon Adventure. I actually haven't watched either of those. Have you seen either of those?
I saw The Poseidon Adventure a couple of times. We might have like gotten it on VHS or something. When I was like 12 or something. So I remember bits of it. I remember thinking it was cheesy at the time, that whenever there was like some new danger, it had like this really distinctive like sparking effect on screen. Like, oh, here's the danger, and they would do this big sparking explosion. And I was like, I don't think it would really look like that, but at least I guess my eyes know that something bad has just happened. But yeah, I mean, I haven't seen too many of those kind of classic disaster films. The closest I can think of is the Titanic one that we watched, the British Titanic one, that I think is kind of in the same spirit of like the big ensembles where there's no one A lead. It's kind of spread out.
Yeah. The posters for Towering Inferno, for instance, definitely have a whole lot of names on there. It's like a Wes Anderson movie.
And our friend Hunter Allen, he appeared on the pod once when we talked about Snow White and Disney films. He has a huge retrospective on the 70s disaster flicks. So if we ever talk about one of those, maybe we can pull him in.
That could be cool. Another connection to Dr. Strangelove, though, is that there is some doubling at work. Actors playing more than one character. In Dr. Strangelove, it's Peter Sellers who keeps popping up. But in Mars Attacks, Jack Nicholson, in addition to playing the president, plays this magnate of a casino, this like business mogul guy trying to start a new casino in Las Vegas. He's like a cowboy businessman type. And we spend a lot of time in Nevada. I don't know why so much in Nevada. Do you have ideas about why so much of this movie revolves around Nevada, Dan?
That's a really interesting question, and I would posit a few guesses. Well, first of all, on the doubling thing, before we move on from that, I spent the whole movie trying to figure out who that guy was, the Galaxy Casino owner. It did not register for me that was Jack Nicholson until I was looking at the credits. So he's like, kind of like in Doctor Strangelove, where it's not just like very obviously the same guy.
Yeah, distinct personas and distinct costuming.
Really playing up their differences, yeah. So I would say maybe the reasons that this is set in Nevada, there's a lot of that, is first of all, isn't that where Area 51 is?
Right. So Nevada's got Area 51, and then New Mexico has Roswell. So I think we definitely associate aliens with the Southwest.
Yeah. And I would say probably another piece of that is like the whole Vegas, just like over the top commotion of Vegas and the glitziness and never sleeps. I feel like that has alien stuff associated with it. Maybe that's just Area 51, but isn't it like a thing where something about Elvis didn't actually die, but he lives in Vegas? Or maybe I'm just thinking of Elvis impersonators in Vegas or something, but I don't know. I feel like I always associate Vegas with otherworldly stuff too.
Yeah, I think there's something to that it's like this outlandish place. Everything's colorful, but also it kind of represents mankind's hubris. The idea that you take a big city and you put it out in the inhospitable desert. So it's kind of this impossible fantasy land, and in a sense, like thumbing our nose at God and nature to have this thing where it clearly doesn't belong.
And then in addition to that, it being Las Vegas, like the most artificial, separated from the way that man evolved place on Earth, you know?
Mm-hmm. So this other Jack Nicholson, the casino guy, he's researching, getting ready to start this new casino, which is going to be called Galaxy. And he has a hippie wife played by Annette Bening, who kind of bemoans his capitalist impulses and is just embodying the whole like new age thing that can't we all just get along, kumbaya, like let nature and crystals and yoga shine through. That's what she's about.
And so one thing I would point out here is that, well, a couple things as kind of background, I guess. This film did not get very good reviews. So right now, I think it's at like 56% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yo, how is that the Rotten Tomatoes score? I don't understand. And it's like the audience and the critics, they feel the same way.
Is the audience score similar?
Yeah, they're like both in the 50s.
So, and I would imagine that if they had Rotten Tomatoes in 1996, that number would have been even lower. Like, typically, classic movies, their scores tend to go up over time because because modern writers will write about older movies when they're kind of like revisiting them, usually affectionately. So I kind of feel like that suggests that it got over half of positive reviews. I would wager it got worse than that with contemporary reviews. But I think part of that is the script. It's like, if you want to go back to the Independence Day versus this movie kind of comparison, this movie, everybody's like a cartoon character, and almost all of them are like obnoxious cartoon characters, which kind of plays up the camp element. But like, to be honest, I found a lot of the characters annoying, even when I liked the actors. Like, I kind of get why this was off-putting at the time, you know? Nowadays it feels fresh, but at least that was my opinion. But the script, the characters and their dialogue, everyone's just like an over-the-top version of some type.
Yeah, everybody's an archetype. Hard to say that there's a protagonist. I mean, I think there is a protagonist, and yet we don't spend much time with that person. So there's a lot of jumping around.
I am surprised that audience score is that low. I wonder why. See, this seems like the kind of movie that would be fondly remembered, but by people who were kids at the time, or people going back and watching it and being like, yo, this movie's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Like you said, classic films tend to catch on over time. Classic film, maybe too generous, but I like this one a lot. Another group of people that we see from time to time is this couple of news anchors, played by Sarah Jessica Parker and Michael J. Fox. So 2 more names for the marquee. But the Michael J. Fox character is an anchor at what's essentially CNN, like a big cable news network, while Sarah Jessica Parker hosts a morning talk show like, I don't know, The View, or the show that Drew Barrymore's got these days. I think they call it Fashion Today, is the show that she's got, which her boyfriend, Michael J. Fox, kind of looks down on condescendingly. Some other figures who are big in the cast and prominent in the story. There's a retired boxer named Byron, played by actor Jim Brown, who works at one of the casinos as like a low-level entertainer draw. Like he was formerly, I guess, the heavyweight champion, and now he's like in the twilight of his career.
Right. So you called him actor Jim Brown. I mean, Jim Brown is one of the greatest football players of all time. I was like, oh my gosh, Jim Brown did like a cheesy Tim Burton movie? Because he was a running back, and he played for the Browns, you know, synergy with his last name. And I mean, if you ever look at greatest football players of all time list, he invariably shows up in the top 5 or top 10. And I think when ESPN did like a sports century list, the greatest athletes of the 20th century, I think they had him at number 4 across all sports, and the number 1 football player. I mean, nowadays I think Tom Brady's the unanimous GOAT of football players, but he's certainly up there.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. But I mean, he looks like a football player. He's a big guy. Yeah,
and I was trying to think, like, what is the archetype that he's playing here? And it's not Muhammad Ali, because he was too much of his own thing, but like the idea of like a boxer, back when boxers were more bigger celebrities. Boxing doesn't have the cachet it had in the 50s and the 60s, you know?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe like George Foreman.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
but he's kind of estranged. Well, he has an ex-wife who he keeps on good terms with, but they're separated, and they have 2 kids. And the ex-wife is played by Pam Grier, who we saw in Something Wicked This Way Comes. Now I know we're a ways removed from Halloween. With all the current events, it seems like it was a while ago already, even though it was just a week ago. But I thought that Mars Attacks served as like a good capper to the slate of films that we watched for spooky season, because there were like several connections that I saw. Obviously, we had multiple alien invasion films, but now we've got some Pam Grier synergy too.
Pam Grier synergy. I like Pam Grier. I'm down with some Pam Grier synergy. Also a big cast like we talked about in The Faculty.
Yes, where it's like every scene you're seeing somebody, whoa, they're in this movie? Definitely. And that also an alien invasion film. Yeah, there's just so many characters. Maybe too many characters. Because there's this family, like this kind of white trash family who lives in a small Nevada town not too far from Vegas. And the person that I'd argue is the protagonist, although no one character gets a whole lot of screen time, is this kid named Richie, who lives in this desert trailer park, and his family runs a donut shop. And he's kind of an underdog for multiple reasons, but one is that his parents very much prefer his older brother and favor his older brother, who's played by Jack Black.
Very funny to have Jack Black in that situation.
Yeah, Jack Black in like the 20th largest role in this movie, but here's another huge name.
Well, it's also funny because he's playing like we think of the Jack Black persona being basically just who he is in School of Rock, you know? Like that's who Jack Black is. But here he's like a bully older brother and like a military guy. And yeah, it's just kind of not how you think of Jack Black normally.
Yeah, Patriot Jack Black has just joined the army, and the parents are really proud of that. But Richie is the favorite of his senile grandmother, who he's always helping around the neighborhood and at her retirement home. That, finally, is the cast of important characters. Takes a long time to even conceive of them all. But the president knows that the aliens are coming, has to respond, and the decision that he hits on is that they are going to greet the aliens diplomatically. Which, like, what other options do you really have? I mean, I guess you could go full military right from the start, but, like, when your whole planet is surrounded, I think signs are strong that you can't really do too much. But I guess we'll get to test that theory as the movie goes along. And so they roll out the red carpet to the Martians. Also, this like group of scientists that are led by Pierce Brosnan develop a interstellar translation machine that's going to let them talk to the aliens and understand what they say back. What'd you think of the scenes where they're talking to the aliens, Dan?
The first thing it had me thinking of was, have you seen the Denis Villeneuve movie Arrival, Brian?
Yes, I have, with Amy Adams.
Yeah. So basically that entire movie is what happens between scenes here. Like, how can we figure out how these aliens communicate with their language? And then can we understand what they say? And it just happens between scenes here, which actually made me laugh when that happened. But it is always funny because they like talk in this quote unquote talk in this like annoying noise. I don't know how you describe the noise. And then we hear the translation through the machine. And it's just kind of like a comic rhythm to it. Cause you're like, hold on, what did they actually say? And then everybody turns to it and tries to listen to it, you know?
Right. Cause the only syllable they say is ack. They go, ack, 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 ack. And then the machine will come back with a response. And you're right, it happens just immediately. They have this tool that can do this, which is very retro-futuristic. It incorporates reel-to-reel tape, which I don't think they'd be using in 1996. It seems like something from an earlier decade. But what I think is funny about this translator is that either the aliens are just constantly lying, or the machine doesn't work. And we never quite get an answer which is which. I'm not sure which is funnier, but in either case, it's funny.
I'm not sure it had occurred to me that they had just made an incompetent translation machine. That's kind of funny.
But this diplomatic meeting unfolds. The aliens come down in Nevada, of course. It's the town where Richie lives, Pahrump, Nevada, which I guess is a real place. I looked it up. But, like, everybody, most of this large cast of characters descends on this meeting place in Nevada. So the news people go there, Sarah Jessica Parker and Michael J. Fox, and the Colin Powell character is designated as, like, the official emissary of the U.S. government. As he's going to be there to shake the hand of the Martian ambassador. And one of my biggest laughs is this Colin Powell character driving out into the desert in this little Jeep. And he calls his wife. And he says, "Yeah, honey, I'm going to greet the Martian ambassador. Didn't I tell you, if I'm just nice to everybody and stay in my lane, everything will work out." It doesn't work out.
I think that is, yeah.
Because, like, everybody starts up their news cameras and they're getting ready for this broadcast, and the Martians come out of this 50s saucer ship and walk down the aisle. And the translation machine is going this whole time, and what the Martians allegedly say is that they come in peace. And so everybody's cheering. World meets world. Then a hippie releases a dove, and all hell breaks loose. The Martians freak out, and they just start zapping everybody with their ray guns.
Yeah, because people are cheering peaceful doves, and then they start shooting people. I like your idea that the translator is just wrong, and they're like, "You will be our slaves, we're going to take over your planet." But what it got translated to is, "We come in peace," and then they just start blasting everybody. That's pretty funny. Because whatever it is, something got lost in translation.
Yeah, something's not right.
Yeah.
When somebody gets zapped with a ray gun in this movie, they instantly become a skeleton. Like teenagers from outer space.
Oh yeah, there you go.
That's how the ray guns work, except because it's in color now, it's either a bright red skeleton or a bright green skeleton. Now the president and the advisors are scrambling over at the White House. They're like, well, what the hell do we do now? Because that didn't go the way that we expected. Also, the aliens scoop up Sarah Jessica Parker and return to space. The next round of discussion then is they get the Martians back on the phone and are like, what the hell? What? Yeah, you know, you zapped a bunch of people. We didn't think you were going to do that. The next decision then is, well, benefit of the doubt. They don't understand our culture. Maybe the dove set them off, because everything went nuts when the dove came out. And the Martians, according to the translator, say, yeah, our bad. Let us apologize at a joint session of Congress. What would you have done in this situation, Dan?
Well, this was making me laugh because they're aliens, so you're going to be inherently skeptical of them. And then you're just going to and then, okay, aliens, you want to be very careful. That would be my thought. You would not think that inherently they're going to be peaceful. But sure, we translate they're going to be peaceful, fine. Then they come and they just do some mass slaughter of your military. But then they're like, oh wait, my bad. We're not actually, no. Bring us to Congress with all of your lawmakers and we'll just make a pronouncement of peace to everyone. And they do that. They like let the aliens like right into the Capitol building and immediately start blasting Congress. Like they don't even hesitate. It's like, I don't know. I feel like they were a little too trusting of the aliens, especially after they had already committed significant acts of violence to the humans. But it just made me laugh because every time the humans would be like, well, maybe, then the aliens would just come and like cause havoc.
Yeah, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. By the way, at the first Martian meeting, Colin Powell got evaporated. Also, Michael J. Fox got evaporated.
Yeah, they just start dropping like flies.
Yeah, you don't know who's going to last in this movie. And at the session of Congress, Pierce Brosnan, the scientist, gets abducted. So then he and Sarah Jessica Parker are sitting around up on the ship, and they get probed. They get analyzed by the Martians. Ultimately, they get, like, chopped up and dissected, and then all that's left is their severed heads that can still look around and talk. Sarah Jessica Parker gets attached to her Chihuahua's body. So it's a little dog running around with Sarah Jessica Parker's head.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah. Definitely a memorable series of events the first time I saw this. It's like, what?
Very emblematic of something that would not be in Independence Day. Like a CGI Chihuahua Sarah Jessica Parker hybrid flirting with a decapitated Pierce Brosnan.
That's right, because immediately, despite this gruesome turn of events, they're flirting with each other. They're like, well, I've always had a crush on you on the TV. And she's like, aw, and the little dog leg is like scratching behind her ear.
And I think we also see the Chihuahua's head go on her body briefly, too. Oh, one laugh for me that we didn't mention, and I IM'd you about this one, is at the Congress. They're like, all right, this time we're going to get it right. We're not going to bother the aliens. There are these people working at the place that said, one of them has a sign that says no applause, and one of them has a sign that says no birds. And it's like, okay, it was the applause and the birds that set them off last time, so let's not do that this time. And just the idea that people were holding up a sign with the instructions, something about that made me laugh.
Dan messaged me that a good couple's costume for Halloween would be no applause and no birds.
People with the signs, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Jack Black is dead too.
I feel like, I think you missed one significant character, Brian. Unless I'm mistaken. Natalie Portman's in this too.
Oh, yeah. So we see early on the president's family. The first lady is Glenn Close, and the president's daughter is Natalie Portman.
Oh, yeah, her too. Cast just keeps growing.
Now the president has still got to figure out what to do, because obviously the aliens are hostile. Probably should have caught on the first time, but after the second, it's beyond doubt. For a little while, so they took out the legislative branch, and the executive branch is saying, oh, well, okay, well, we gotta, lock everything down in the White House, and maybe we'll be safe here for a little bit. We can hold them off, because it's the most secure building in the country. They'll stay outside. We won't fall for their tricks anymore. Don't let them in. But they managed to breach the White House by seducing Martin Short, who's again, he's the press secretary, if you forgot, the PR guy for the White House. And he's portrayed as having a penchant for prostitutes. So they send in this ostensible woman that's very spacey looking to seduce Martin Short. And what I was thinking of was Lost Skeleton of Cadavra, because this woman, Dan, is played by Lisa Marie, who was, at the time, Tim Burton's girlfriend. You said directors send in their sexy wives to be sexy sometimes in their movies. And that's the role here. Very, very Animala, doing the dance.
So wait, is that Lisa Marie Presley?
I don't think so. I think it's a different... Let's verify that. But it's the woman who played Vampira in Ed Wood.
No, you're right. It's a totally different. It's her, Lisa Marie Smith, known professionally as Lisa Marie, best known for roles with Tim Burton.
Yeah. Of course, a couple years later, he'd kick Lisa Marie to the curb in exchange for Helena Bonham Carter after she played the chimp woman in his remake of Planet of the Apes. He decided, nope, hit the skids. I want the chimp.
Episode title there.
But yeah, so she reveals that she is a Martian under this suit. She like bites off Martin Short's finger. The first time I saw this freaked me out when she bites off the finger. Like, nothing else in the movie disturbed me that much, but I really didn't like that. Because the aliens, they need some different gas to survive. They can't normally breathe the Earth atmosphere, and so they've got, like, sandy cheeks from SpongeBob suits, where they've got the glass dome around their heads that is pumped with the gas that they need. And so for this Martian temptress to come after Martin Short, she's got to chew chewing gum that's infused with the gas. And he goes to fish the gum out, and she bites his fingers off. I guess I don't like losing fingers. I didn't like that when it happened to Jenna Ortega in the X movie.
Oh yeah.
It's gnarly. I feel like you don't think about how much you use your hands until you lose your hands.
Funny that one bothered you, but not decapitations and skeletonifications. I guess you're right. There's something visceral about losing a limb. Yeah. Hands in particular.
What do you ever think about, would you rather be blind or deaf?
I've definitely had that conversation with people, yeah.
And what's your answer?
I think it's pretty obviously that you would rather be deaf than blind in most circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. I guess that's an easy one to answer because our culture is so visual.
Right.
You could still read subtitles. It's what do you really need to listen to? Although I think if you lost your hearing, you would probably find it's a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I think, that is an easy choice to make.
I mean, think about how you would function in society if you were A versus B. Okay, if you were blind, you couldn't drive a car. You couldn't go from one place to another, know what's happening in front of you. Our sense of vision is just so essential with the way that we interact with the world and perceive the world. Much more of a precise observational sense than hearing. But I mean, I'm not saying oh, hearing's no big deal at all, because that would be miserable, being deaf. But yeah.
Yeah. So we're on the same page. A bit of a tangent, but after almost 200 episodes, we got to find different things to talk about. The Martians now in the White House, though. So things are going crazy. The Secret Service is trying to shield the president. Meanwhile, Byron's kids, the boxer, his two sons, young teenage sons, are on a field trip to the White House, just by coincidence. And it's kind of been established that they love playing shooter games, like Area 51 at the arcade. And so they're ready. They've been preparing for this. And they pick up ray guns from the fallen Martians. I guess you can still shoot a Martian. As powerful as they are, they still are vulnerable to bullets. And now there are some ray guns in human possession, and the kids help the president get to safety down in his bunker. But Glenn Close doesn't make it. She gets smushed like a chandelier falls and slices her apart. And yeah, the body count is mounting. You never know who's going to stick around. One of the Jack Nicholsons bites it because his casino gets blown up. But his wife is more of a main character. She gets away from that and then is kind of running around Vegas forming a little posse of survivors. Her and Byron meet up. And they're like trying to make it out through the wreckage of Vegas.
This is another thing that made me think of Independence Day, because in Independence Day, you kind of have this growing contingent of people figuring out how to take out the aliens all together across different class and social strata and stuff.
Right. If there is a unifying theme for who is getting killed by the Martians, it's like the elite and the wealthy. One of the Letterboxd reviews said, this is the closest thing we're going to get to Tim Burton's Eat the Rich movie. So there is some social consciousness, perhaps, but if you just want to see people getting fried by aliens, you can just appreciate that aspect of it, too.
And who among us doesn't?
The president is now down in this more secure underground facility, very Dr. Strangelove, with the big round table. Man, Dr. Strangelove is so good. I watched it again last night just to have it fresh, and I did really appreciate it. So many actors giving good performances, especially George C. Scott as the advisor who's like very pro Air Force and almost like coming to terms with how dangerous the Air Force is. Like he's very proud of it, but then comes to fear it by the end. He's like, oh, wait a minute. There's a moment when he's like gesturing at he keeps talking about the big board. They have this display in the war room that it like can display where all the planes are at any given moment with little blinking lights. And he loves the big board and he doesn't want the Russians to see the big board. But at one point he's like gesturing at it and backing up towards the big board and he trips over his own feet and he like does a shoulder roll backwards and jumps back up, which supposedly was not supposed to happen. It just did while they were rolling and they kept it in the movie.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
But just the tension that's mounting all throughout the story, and that, yeah, even if you like bust your ass and are rolling head over heels, you just keep going because time is of the essence. Good film. So that's the kind of environment that we're at this point in Mars Attacks, is that everybody's hunkered down because things are really going south for the world. This is like almost peak Martian triumph. They start just bulldozing national monuments and world monuments, cultural UNESCO sites. It's like, you know, knock down the Taj Mahal, use the Easter Island heads as bowling pins. It's like a very cartoonish montage of terrorizing the Earth now that there's not much left to stand in their way.
That's, again, another Independence Day thing, because the big set pieces in Independence Day are highly elaborate explosions of landmarks.
I was wondering, Dan, have you ever played the pinball game Attack from Mars?
No.
All right, so this is a pinball game. I guess it came out in 1995. So I'm wondering how this came about, because it's like a very similar story and gameplay that this pinball machine has, where it's a cartoonish but grim Martian invasion and very much involves destroying the landmarks. And you're like firing your pinballs to attack the ships and try to keep them from destroying the landmarks. So maybe it's an ant bug life thing.
Interesting. I had another one of those just recently. Just last night, I watched the movie Time Cut, which is about a Back to the Future scenario where someone goes back in time to prevent their relative from being murdered like 20 years in the past as part of a slasher murder spree, which is exactly the same pitch as the movie Totally Killer from late 2023. So another scenario where I think something was in the air. I guess right now, like, slashers, high concept slashers are the thing. So not too surprising that two people made Back to the Future slashers, but that's one I was thinking of too.
Now, sometimes the vibes align. Also, maybe there's some, like, corporate espionage at work.
That too.
Who can say? The Martians, though, do eventually infiltrate this underground bunker. And they come in and they blast all the advisors who have been pitching their various views. And then there's the showdown with President Nicholson. And he gets a chance to do, like, is it Pullman or is it Paxton in Independence Day?
Pullman.
Okay, Pullman. There is a movie that has them both. Maybe one day we'll have to cover that.
I don't get them mixed up the way that you do.
I mean, they're kind of generic white guys who were, like, B-level movie stars in the 90s. Which one is it in Titanic?
That one's Paxton. They each have their own distinct vibes to them. Like, I think of Pullman as more like he's one you're more likely to cast as the president. He's got like a more of a white collar vibe to him. Whereas Bill Paxton, you mentioned him as like someone who would be the hero of a Clive Cussler novel or whatever that guy's name is. He's got kind of like a grittier man of the earth vibe to him.
And who was it in Twister?
Paxton.
Okay. All right. It's starting to gel for me a little bit. But in Independence Day, I know Pullman gets to make a big speech. And here this is Nicholson's moment to make a speech. But it doesn't work. He pleads for peace, gets this big dramatic monologue, and the aliens blast him. As I'm sure by this point, if you've been paying attention, you knew he wasn't going to get out of this. These aliens don't play around. They're merciless. They just want to zap. And actually, they kill the president with this weird, like, cartoon mechanical hand thing that transforms into a flagpole and, like, skewers him. And then mechanically raises a little Martian flag. Essentially now the government has been decapitated. There's no authority anymore. It's, if humanity is going to prevail, it's going to come down to the lower echelons to do it. So out in Nevada, Barbara, the casino owner's wife, and Byron, the boxer, they meet up, and they're rounding up these other survivors, as we mentioned. Headline act at the casino, Tom Jones joins them. The guy who sings It's Not Unusual.
It's not unusual to be in love. The Carlton song.
That's right, with the little dance. And another guy who joins them. So Tom Jones is playing himself. So he has the fame level that Tom Jones has. But then this other guy runs up and joins them, who is just supposed to be like a nobody tourist who happens to be in Vegas. Except that's Danny DeVito.
A cast so big that, like, we mentioned 15 actors more famous than Danny DeVito and forgot him. Philoctetes himself.
So they're running around, and they come up with a plan that they're going to, like, maybe one of them already has a plane, or they know somebody who has a plane. They're going to get to this little airstrip on the outskirts of Vegas, and they're going to take this plane and try to hide out, like, in the wilderness. What it reminded me of was in Dawn of the Dead, basically, in the 70s, they have this plan that they're going to take a helicopter and try to find a place that's not as run through with zombies. But they get out to this airstrip, and there are aliens there obstructing them. And so Byron has I think you've called it an apotheosis, right? What's an apotheosis, Dan?
So wait, who are you saying has the apotheosis here?
It's a boxer. I don't know. That's how I think of it. Maybe you have used it for different contexts, but sometimes in a movie you've got a scene where you've got a character who's like a strongman, like a warrior type. And he has the chance to have like a mano-a-mano showdown with a big, overwhelming throng of enemies that no individual enemy could take this strongman down, but there's this dramatic climax where, like, the group, he says, go on ahead, and I'll face him down. And it's like, he's probably not going to make it out of this, but he buys them some time in this big Custer's Last Stand moment.
Right, yeah. Apotheosis is like when you reach your highest peak. It's like you've ascended to the gods at that point. So I don't know if that's exactly how I would use it, but it's like a moment of glory for sure, you know?
Yeah. It's like Woody Harrelson in Zombieland does this. I feel like maybe in Lord of the Rings it happened at some point.
Like, you know, you would shoot this to slow motion.
Yeah. It's like this dude is going to die, and the group kind of tearfully runs on. And he fist fights the aliens, because what he's talked about throughout this film is that his glory days as a boxer are behind him. You know, he was the heavyweight champion once, but everybody gets old. And so, yeah, he's going to box the aliens. Kind of strange to me that the Martians agree to this, but I guess, you know, that you need a challenge every once in a while. It's like just blasting people with your ray guns, maybe that gets old. But as Byron is boxing the aliens and seemingly getting overwhelmed, the other survivors from Vegas get away in this little 4-seater plane. And while this is going on, Richie is also surviving in the wasteland. Richie, the younger brother of the departed Jack Black, and he's taking care of his grandmother.
We mentioned him, but who he had me thinking of, he's kind of like a generic 90s cool guy teen. He's got like a, you know, kind of late grunge era. He's got the flannel shirt and the shoulder length hair.
Think Will Friedle.
Oh, that's interesting, because I was going to say, he reminded me of a little bit of Joseph Gordon-Levitt in that TV show where he was an alien. Or it's a different era, but the Wiley Wiggins is the guy in Dazed and Confused, the 8th grader in Dazed and Confused, where he's kind of got a spaciness to him that guy has also.
Yeah, I can see that. But while they're... I think Richie goes to save the grandma. Like, the grandma's at the retirement home, and Richie goes to get her. So he's dodging Martians. And when he finds her, she's, like, contentedly off in her own world. She's got the dementia. But she has headphones on. And Grandma likes to listen to cowboy singer Slim Whitman. And while Richie is kind of jostling Grandma, getting her out of the besieged apartment, the headphones get unplugged. And what comes blasting out of the speakers is this song called Indian Love Call, which is a yodeling song. Slim Whitman yodeling.
Why this song?
It's a good question, why this song. But it's this, like, wailing yodel that goes, ah! It's kind of like the Yahoo jingle. And the aliens hate it. They cannot deal with Slim Whitman yodeling to the point that their brains explode if exposed to Indian Love Call by Slim Whitman.
Yeah, I was going to say, saying they hate it is like an understatement. Like, there are songs that I hate, but it doesn't make my brain literally liquefied and shoot out of my ears. Like, for whatever reason, this specific song, it's like, you know how they say if you sing, an opera singer could hypothetically break glass if they sang like a pitch resonant enough and direct enough it could shatter the glass. Like you typically see this with a wine glass, you know. It's kind of like that, but for whatever reason, it's this Slim Whitman yodeling makes their brains explode.
But it's always got to be something in stories like this. Think about the original War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells. Humanity would be sunk. Humanity's got no defense against these super powerful, technologically advanced Martians, except it just so happens that suddenly they all keel over and die because of disease on the Earth. Germs they weren't ready to contend with. So, basically a deus ex machina.
Deus ex yodela.
Although in the case of germs, I mean, that happens. One way or the other when you got cultural exchange going on. Like, a whole lot of the Native Americans in North America weren't ready for the germs that came from the Europeans in the Columbian Exchange. And that just decimated their population. And then the same thing kind of happened the other way around when, like, the French took over, like, parts of the Caribbean and South America. Like, the Europeans in that case weren't ready to deal with the jungle germs. So it can happen. That idea didn't come out of nowhere, but yodeling, I don't know if anybody's brain has exploded from yodeling yet in the historical record.
That's a new one. Have you seen Signs by M. Night Shyamalan, Brian?
Only parts of it. But I think in that case it's water, right?
Which is particularly ridiculous because why would you go to Earth if water's going to be the thing?
Yeah, why land on a planet that's all water if you knew that was a problem?
Exactly.
Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they just had not dealt with water before.
Encountered water before? Yeah. And that one has a particularly funny thing. It's that it's not like, oh, the air, the water in the air fries them as soon as they get out. It's that, like, one particular family, a kid has a premonition to get a whole bunch of glasses of water, and then he tosses them on the aliens, and that figures out that's how you defeat them. It's like, oh, I wonder, there's no way that anyone would have figured out that secret fact about the aliens if not for this one kid putting a couple of glasses of water on the table.
Yeah, nobody's got a sprinkler going. It's not raining anywhere that the Martians are.
Right, exactly.
Pretty stupid. And yet, I like M. Night Shyamalan. We've talked M. Night Shyamalan not too long ago. You said he makes movies where things happen. Can't knock that too much.
Definitely not. I like things that happen.
And so things are happening here in Mars Attacks. Richie knows now that what can stop the aliens en masse. I mean, before you could shoot one or two aliens. Like, they're not invulnerable. But obviously they'd done a number on the human race, and now we have this secret weapon. Get this Indian love call on the airwaves. So I like the editing here because it goes from, like, just Richie with a boombox driving around to then he slaps the record on, like, the local radio station, and then it cuts and, like, the sons of the boxer are running through the cities with their boomboxes, and then we jump ahead a little in time and it's like the army going through and they've got, like, a tank playing Indian Love Call. So you can kind of see how it's progressing around the world. And soon the streets are just piled with alien corpses.
I guess if you were going to say something, if you were going to read into this choice to have this random country yodeling song be the death of the aliens, it's that, like, a celebration of our culture. Even the cheesy things in our culture. You know, it takes place in Vegas where everything's artificial and heightened and corny. And now you're blasting a heightened, corny country music song, and that's destroying the aliens. We do have culture as kitschy white people, Brian.
Yeah, you mentioned Elvis, and what this movie feels like to me is a velvet Elvis painting.
Okay.
It's like living inside a velvet Elvis.
Velvet Elvis. That's hard to say.
It is. I already screwed it up. But it's like a relic of cultural kitsch. That it has to be like specific colors on a specific medium, a specific subject, and then you sell it in a gift shop. And yeah, that such a niche thing can be a cultural artifact. And it's got the colors, and it's got the like inflated importance of a pop culture figure. I don't know. It has that feeling to me that Mars Attacks has.
Okay.
So now, yeah, human survivors going around scooping up dead aliens and shuffling them off to the dump. They've all got this goopy brain matter everywhere. They're like a whole planet of just gooey death, but human triumph carrying the day. Richie and Grandma get medals from the president's daughter, Natalie Portman, because she's the only one left of the president's family. But it had me wondering, like, where's the vice president? Where's the rest of the chain of command? Like, it's not like a royal family.
I know. Why is Natalie Portman the one who's the representative of the United States now? Unanswered. Who's the designated survivor in a Martian attack, Brian?
Yeah. But what's funny is, like, after this exchange of the medal, Natalie Portman is immediately flirting with Richie, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna date now. So, remember I compared Richie to Will Friedle. So I think this whole movie is just like a shadow setup for another installment in My Date with the President's Daughter.
That's a good point.
It's like, just get us to another Dating the President's Daughter movie. All that other stuff was just prologue.
To me, that was like your half-hearted shout out to the teens. Like, oh, you got to have the cute teens fall in love by the end. The attractive young cast.
Oh, and as the Martian mothership is falling out of the sky, the severed heads of Sarah Jessica Parker and Pierce Brosnan start making out.
There's an image for you.
Yeah, that to me is like the culmination of what this movie has to offer. I was like pumping my fist. It's like, yes, of course, that is what has to happen. All the pieces are coming together. This is what cinema can offer.
To me, that is cinema. Have you seen that meme?
I do remember it, but like, what was the context? I've literally only seen it as a meme.
I think it's a Korean director. I think it's the guy who did Parasite.
Oh yeah, Bong Joon-ho. That's right. Yep.
Doing like just some interview talking about cinema. I think is the context, and it's a clip of that, and with with the caption, "To me, that's cinema." And then you like, of course, you always have to pair that with something utterly ridiculous, like the whammy battle in 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T. To me, that is cinema. Alien brains blowing up when a yodel song plays. To me, that is cinema.
I agree. Also, somehow, Jim Brown survived. He made it out of that pile of Martians, like Woody Harrelson does in his movie. So I guess sometimes it feels good to see the hero survive. Yeah,
to let the hero survive, right?
And he heads home to reunite with his estranged family. The whole movie, so at his casino that he works at, there's like an ancient Egypt theme. And so he's got like a black pharaoh costume. So most of the movie he's in, this Egypt garb. It's a good costume. It kind of fits the whole like kitsch thing that's happening.
Right.
And then in my, like, unironically, one of my top 5 favorite endings in movies, the group of the Vegas survivors emerges from this like desert cave that I guess they found. And so this is Barbara and the other people on the plane. So Tom Jones, that's key, comes up out of this hole in the ground, and it's a new day has dawned for the Earth and the humans. And as they emerge, there might even be like a little bit of the Peer Gynt suite or something. It's like triumphant morning has come, and woodland creatures surround them, like happens at one point in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. And there's just this swelling of pride. The humans have made it. Tom Jones sticks out his arm and a falcon lands on it. And then he goes into It's Not Unusual. And the credits
Perfect.
roll. I love that so much. The da 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 da. After all the carnage, it's like Tom Jones is ready to roll. I really, really love this ending.
We must go on. Our cheesy, the things that make us American, that make us consumers in late 20th century, late capitalism, must persist. In fact, are beautiful.
That's right. It's not about the continuity of the government. It's about the kitsch ephemera. It's about It's Not Unusual. It's about the Vegas sideshows. And that's Mars Attacks from 1996.
There we go. We did it.
We did it. We've come out the other side of spooky season, and now we have to determine what's next. So, Dan, other comments, other feelings, other sentiments? Are we ready to say, is it good?
I've got just a couple other thoughts that I'll kind of throw in here. So there was this video that went semi-viral. I don't know, within a small subset of the internet, after Taylor Swift's album came out. This one guy who claims that he hates the producer Jack Antonoff. So this is a guy who's produced a bunch of Taylor Swift's music and did about half or 3/4 of the songs on Taylor Swift's most recent album. And it's this guy's friend flipping through, hitting next on Taylor Swift's album. And even though to me they kind of all sound the same, or there's nothing qualitatively different about any of them, the guy was able to immediately tell if it was a Jack Antonoff production. It was just the instant the timbre hit his ears, he knew it was a Jack Antonoff thing. For him, that was negative. But for some reason, that's me and Danny Elfman. I don't dislike him, but whenever it's a Danny Elfman soundtrack, immediately my ears are like, oh, that's Danny Elfman. And I had even forgotten that Tim Burton and Danny Elfman worked together. But as soon as the soundtrack started, I was like, oh, this has got to be a Danny Elfman soundtrack. Oh, of course, it's Tim Burton. It's got to be Danny Elfman. But for whatever reason, Danny Elfman, I just instantly recognize when it's something that he's composed. So I had that sensation in the opening 15 seconds of Mars Attacks.
Yeah, I'm glad that you called that out. I neglected to mention that this has got Tim Burton feelings. It looks and it sounds like Tim Burton because it's got that Danny Elfman soundtrack. It's bombastic fanfare type stuff for the aliens, and it's very present, very score forward. I think you've said a couple times before.
And I was also thinking about the fact that there's the president, and there's we see some of his advisors. So you brought that to Dr. Strangelove, and there's definitely some of that there, especially the competing military personalities giving him advice is very Dr. Strangelove. But I feel like the mid to late 90s had a whole wave of things that focused on the president and the president's staff. So you had the West Wing in 1999. You had the American President. I don't remember exactly when that came out. It was a little before then. We talked about that in our 5th episode ever or something. You had Spin City. I'm pretty sure it wasn't... Oh, wait. Was Spin City...
Spin City had Michael J. Fox.
But that was it was the mayor. That wasn't the president, right?
I never saw it. Yes, New York City Mayor's Office.
Okay.
But I what I was thinking, so that does make sense then. I wasn't really sure what Spin City was about, but I had a vague sense that it was something like that. I was also thinking of the Rob Lowe character from West Wing when I was seeing Michael J. Fox in this movie.
And I don't know, I think that's like a vestige of Clinton era when like we kind of viewed the president and his team as competent and not like either a clown show or like comically evil, which I think is kind of how the various administrations since have been depicted. I guess Obama was also kind of thought of as like a competent type, you know, but like George W. Bush, you had Dick Cheney, lots of Machiavellian vibes given off there. And then, of course, the Trump clown show. I don't know. I feel like that's like a thing that you saw a lot in the 90s that you just don't see quite as often anymore.
Right. And something we would have talked about had we done a dedicated swing vote episode is there was a window in time where things were Sorkin-esque, at least in the public imagining of the American government.
That's a good point, too. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like everything can be settled by a speech that like reaffirms human commonalities. And we're just not really feeling that right now.
And of course, both West Wing and The American President or Sorkin scripts. Yeah, there's a lot going on in this movie. I guess I can save some of my other thoughts for our Is It Good? So I will talk us into that, Brian. Is It Good is our signature section where we each give the movie a rating on our 8-point goodness scale, ranging from very not good, which is a 1 out of 8, to our masterpiece rating, toward a good. That's an 8 out of 8. So I'll go first. Is Mars Attacks! Exclamation point. Gotta have the exclamation point in there. Some movies don't earn their exclamation points in their title. This one earns the exclamation point in its title, I would say, Brian. Mars Attacks! Exclamation point. Directed by Tim Burton from 1996. Is it good? So, a couple things we didn't say that I kind of noticed, and I wonder how it would strike me on replay. It feels like forever till you see the aliens. And I think that's a byproduct of just how many characters we have to set up. Like that first exchange where the aliens blow them up is like 35 minutes into the film. And when we just kind of glossed over, it's just character introductions for the first half hour of the film, which I don't know. I feel like I've been a stickler for movies being paced well or for being too long. I wouldn't say it's too long overall. I think it's well less than 2 hours. But I definitely did feel like it got to a little bit of a slow start. Although that's mitigated by the sheer number of faces that pop up. It's like a dopamine. You're like, oh my God, Natalie Portman's in this? Oh my God, Jack Black's in this? Oh my God, Michael J. Fox is in this? Just over and over and over again. Glenn Close? And I also think that the jokes that it has, in the script, the jokes tend to not be very good. I was not laughing at the it's just kind of like a sort of campy over the topness, like rather than actual comedy. It's almost like a parody of a style. But it's kind of made up for with like the manic action of everything else, I would say. So, I don't know. I can get why it was panned. And I think if I had seen it in a bad mood or a mood where I wasn't open to this flavor, I would have found it pretty annoying. I also think if you don't like bad CGI, you're going to have a bad time here because there's a lot of that CGI look to it. All that said, those are just kind of my mitigating factors for why I'm not going higher than this. Because I do think it works as a film. It's just unique. I mean, it's unique in a way that it still feels like it's of its era and connected to all these other things. But it's just kind of got its own over-the-top flavor. It's the kind of movie that I'm glad exists. And I'm surprised that, like you said, you were surprised that you didn't know about this when you saw it. I just feel like this is something that's kind of, we've collectively forgotten about Mars Attacks. Like that, a movie like this with this cast and this ridiculousness in it has kind of been forgotten. And it's just charming. It's colorful. It's big. I'm going to give it a high-end good 5 out of 8. And I don't know, maybe if I watched it again, I'd be feeling very good, because I think it's really charming, and it's just got a lot going on in it. It's funny. It's got it escalates. It builds. So yeah, it's not incompetent the way that you think of like bad blockbusters being, where it's just like lacking substance and all spectacle. You know, it was a big alien, high budget film, but that's not what, if you were to criticize it, it wouldn't be for lacking in substance or like characters. I mean, it's not exactly a deep film, but it's like, there's just a lot to it. And I think a lot of people nowadays, the Poptimist era, we like bright colors again. Barbie was the cultural sensation. Maximal, a little silly. I think this would resonate with an audience these days. So go see Mars Attacks, people, if you haven't seen it.
Good. Well, I'm glad it is maximal. It's a crowded film. We said so many people, a lot of stuff, buildings falling down. They bowl with the Easter Island heads. There's like a lot of cartoony action. I like what you said about you not laughing at a lot of the jokes. That reminds me of one time I was talking with a friend about Dr. Strangelove, and he said, I didn't laugh. He said, dark comedy is another word for it not actually being funny. And I think I understand what he's saying there. I think Dr. Strangelove has made me laugh more than this one did. But there's like a bleakness to it. It's like you're confronted with what would a global calamity be like. And it's like so over the top that you have no choice but to laugh. And here, of course, it's zanier with these cartoon aliens and their gizmos and their skeletonizing ray guns. It's not mutually assured destruction by nuclear weapons. But I do find it's like you're chuckling in spite of yourself. Because there's just something garish about the idea that, like, humanity is fragile. Like, we hold up these mighty institutions of government, of the media, and maybe it is all just a house of cards.
It is a little cynical, I would say.
Yeah.
Under its core, when you think about Independence Day as another contrast, like, Independence Day is about even though it's got like Will Smith quipping and it's got big aliens blowing up, like at its core, it's humanity must unite to defeat this overpowering evil. And when Bill Pullman gives that dramatic speech, it's resonated with people because it is inspiring about unity. Kind of like the Aaron Sorkin thing you were talking about. Like, I believe that if we just all focus on working together in a way that is crystallized by these romantic words, that cuts at the inner core of human truth and what we can accomplish. And Mars Attacks is very much not that. They don't win by uniting. They win because some grandma figured out her yodel song makes aliens' brains squirt out of their ears. And we go around playing this yodel song at them. Nothing that the president did. Nothing that people working together. It's, oh no, we just happened to find the right yodel song. In fact, everybody else is like meddling, just made things worse if it did anything. Like they just couldn't get anything done until we happened to find this one trick,
Yeah. Martians hate this one trick. Yeah, in the end, we just got lucky, and we could just as easily have not gotten lucky. And so it's like, if some great force comes and sweeps all the pieces off the board, what is going to be left as evidence that we were here? Is it going to be the Statue of Liberty in the sand, or is it going to be Tom Jones left over? So, it's the kind of thing that's fun to think about in a fiction environment. It's kind of a way to play out the scenario and ask what if. And it's colorful. It's got this Danny Elfman score. Memorable images. It's scattershot, but there's a lot that's here. You may find something that you like. I'm going to give it an easy 6. Very good. And definitely, like, parts of it, it's like, oh, this should be a 7. It seems like it's tailor-made to appeal to me. Like, I like the kind of dark sensibility of it. This is like a sardonic movie. A little bit edgy, but still, like, fun and zany. And I recommend it. But I think ultimately, yeah, 6 out of 8, very good. What about, Dan, Dr. Strangelove from 1964? Happy 60th anniversary.
Yeah, I mean, so it was not exactly what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be more of a talky film, I guess. It definitely has some like terrific exchanges, and the script is really good. And I think one thing I wasn't expecting, which I really should have, because it's made by Stanley Kubrick, is it's a very cinematic film. Like, in my head, it was just people sitting around in a war room talking. In fact, that might have even been how it was pitched to me at one point. It was like, you never knew that generals just talking about a doomsday machine would be the funniest movie you ever saw. Well, I mean, that's kind of what it is, but it's got like, remember, Stanley Kubrick made war movies. He made like The Shining. He made huge cinematic films.
Yeah, 2001.
Right. And so I think there's some of that DNA there. So that's one thing that surprised me a little bit that I felt had been underplayed. It's also, parts of it are like a little broader than I was expecting. Like, the actual Dr. Strangelove character has this alien ghost limb, which basically means, like, it's kind of funny now that I'm thinking back on it, but in the moment I was like, I felt some secondhand embarrassment. Like, he like can't help but, because he's German, he can't help but do Nazi salutes and like other ridiculous things with his hand. It's like this over the top physical comedy with his hand. And I was actually laughing at it, but it also it felt like, I don't know, the movie, whatever it was, I could tell I was watching greatness and that I was really digging it and I was very impressed. And something about it was like, I needed to watch it again and process it one more time. So I think right now I would probably give it a 7. It's just been so showered with praise that I'm confident if I went and watched it again that I would maybe like it even more, because I did quite like it a lot. I think it's very obviously a great film, but let's say for now, let's say exceptionally good. So what about you, Brian?
Nice. So that one gets an 8 from me. I just really admire it. The cinematography is beautiful, which helps when, yes, for a lot of the movie, it's guys sitting around, but the set that they're in is amazing. It's this huge monolithic room with these big screens all around. But I mean, the action is the plane. There's this bomber heading into Russia on the mission to bomb a target in the Soviet Union. And they start out as one of many planes. Like, at the start of the movie, this general snaps, Air Force general, and he orders his, like, 30 planes that he's in charge of, okay, go and drop your bombs in Russia. And, like, you think, okay, well, that's not that many planes, that's not that many bombs, but they point out that each plane has 16 times the explosive power of World War II. So each of these planes is 16 World War IIs. And then, yeah, so that's the jump of the film, as the planes are going in, and they can't get in touch with the general who made the order. And, like, part of the order is that the planes can't be contacted by anybody else to countermand the order unless you have the special code. And then from there, things just get worse. And it's the panel of advisors and the president trying to figure out, well, okay, what do we do? And it kind of unfolds in real time. And the script is just crackerjack. It's really good. And all the performances from the actors are strong, especially George C. Scott, but also like the cowboy actor flying the plane, Slim Pickens. And then eventually there's like this army force that gets sent to break into the rogue Air Force base, and the head of the army guys is Ed Wynn's son, Keenan Wynn, and he's good. The crazy general is played by Sterling Hayden, who was the lead in that Christmas Carol movie that we watched, also from 1964, the Rod Serling Christmas Carol.
That's right.
So, like, just really good performances, and the pacing and the escalation of the script is good. And despite our best efforts, humanity is not able to figure out a solution. And the movie ends when the world ends. So that also, probably over and above Mars Attacks, one of the great endings in film.
Oh, yeah, it's a great one.
Yes.
Because you have the iconic image, too, of the cowboy. There's just, it's a terrific... I know I kind of came off a little mixed there, but just, it's really not because I didn't like it. It's because I'm trying to really vibe with it in a way that I didn't vibe with it, but I was still able to enjoy very, very much of it. I really liked the British guy who's like the second, he's kind of the partner to the general who snaps and gives the order, and his performance and the way that they're kind of making fun of his British politeness and dryness. And of course, like the funny irony of all of this is like, we're examining the way that this kind of political world dysfunctionally operates in the context of a literal doomsday machine that causes the end of the earth. So like when they're like talking about protocol and being careful with their words, and like the way that they're having conversations, just charged with irony in the way that it's all against the backdrop of the world literally ending. It's a doomsday machine, Brian.
Yeah, and it's very good. I debated at some point doing a whole dedicated episode, Dr. Strangelove, but what it would boil down to is I really, really like it. Like the conversations that the president is having over the phone, and you only hear what the president says, but you can understand what the Soviet premier is saying back. The kind of Khrushchev stand-in. Mm-hmm. Because that's the other thing is like you think about that all of these characters are essentially real people. Like you've got the Strangelove, he's Werner von Braun, and the guy who snaps is like Curtis LeMay, the chief of the Air Force. And then you got Khrushchev, and the president is less Eisenhower, more Adlai Stevenson. But it's like things could have gone this way, and it's holding up a mirror to the place and the time and saying we really got to step back from the brink because it wouldn't take much. Really well done. I almost wish that Peter Sellers didn't play so many characters, because I'm sure whoever that they cast in his place would have also been good. They did a really, really good job picking the actors. So yeah, 8 from me. Good movie. Dr. Strangelove.
Bold take by Brian. Dr. Strangelove, pretty good film.
And now, as we face an unforeseen future, Dan, what will we be watching next in the things that we can control?
A film, what I'm going to have us watch, mainly because I just want to make you watch it and I want to hear what you think of it and like what your opinion of this film was as it progresses, is a recent film that just went to streaming called The Substance. And it provoked a strong reaction in me. And I think it does some things that are interesting in it. I think it's going to be a fun conversation.
All right, I've been hearing some good things, good word of mouth. I don't know too much about it yet, and I've tried to keep it that way, so I'm excited to watch. Yeah.
I guess you'd call it a horror film, but I think I don't want to say any more than that because I want to hear what you think. I got a lot of things I want to talk about with this one. It's French, but it's in English, and it's about Hollywood, so you wouldn't even know it's French necessarily. So we'll talk The Substance, Brian.
Looking forward to it, Dan. Thanks for joining us, listeners. We always love having you here on the Goods of Film podcast. Join us again.